Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we are analyzing some source material that, well, it really flips the script on global technological leadership.
It certainly does. It's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah, this isn't about who has the most venture capital, or the biggest chip factory.
No, not about the hardware or the dollars.
It's about morality.
Ethics.
Our sources are making this profound and, frankly, ambitious claim that Pakistan and the broader Muslim world, they're uniquely positioned.
Both demographically and ethically positioned.
Exactly. Positioned to lead the future of artificial intelligence.
And specifically the ethical future of AI. That's the key distinction.
Right. Because when you think about AI ethics today, the guidelines, the debates...
Where does your mind usually go? Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, maybe Brussels, maybe Beijing. That's the usual conversation.
And it's often framed through a very secular lens. Or perhaps utilitarian.
Yeah, focused on optimization, maybe risk avoidance, non-maleficence.
Trying not to cause harm, basically.
But the material we've synthesized suggests something entirely different.
A completely different foundation.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're looking at the idea that ancient moral principles
Values deeply embedded in a faith tradition.
are not relics. They're not things of the past.
No, the argument is they are precisely the frameworks needed now.
The necessary frameworks to control and guide this incredibly powerful modern technology AI.
It's quite a statement.
So our mission in this deep dive is to give you a clear shortcut, a way to understand this blend.
This mix of faith, tech excellence, and ethics.
And why it's being pitched as, well, the defining leadership model for the whole global AI era.
It is a truly visionary position.
Yeah.
And, it immediately injects a moral imperative into a space that's often just dominated by economics, by profit motives.
That's a great point.
The sources argue quite powerfully that every revolution needs a leader. It needs a voice. And they assert that the moral voice for the AI era, a voice of wisdom, can and, well, should originate from the Muslim world.
That's such a radical redefinition of authority, isn't it?
Absolutely. For centuries, tech leadership has been synonymous with hard power.
Military strength, industrial capacity.
Massive sovereign wealth funds, things like that.
Right.
But this vision proposes that moral and intellectual authority derived from a fixed, you could say transcendent, ethical framework.
Not one that shifts with trends.
Exactly. That is the required quality. That's what's needed to set the rules for this next stage of human innovation.
And that distinction you mentioned, a fixed ethical framework versus, say, a utilitarian calculation that seems critical for you, the listener, to grasp.
It really is.
Because if you look at standard Western AI ethics frameworks, they often operate under some form of utilitarianism.
Broadly speaking, yes.
Yeah.
Seeking the greatest good for the greatest number.
Which sounds noble, and it often is. But that approach can sometimes struggle, can't it? Especially with, say, marginalized groups or edge cases.
It can, because a system might, logically, rationalize harm to a few if it seems to benefit the majority. That's the classic utilitarian dilemma.
And it can be relative.
Precisely. Secular frameworks can often become relativistic. They're situational, they're subject to ongoing societal consensus.
Which is always shifting.
Always shifting. So the unique insight offered by this faith-driven perspective, according to the sources, is that it starts with a non-negotiable baseline.
A divine command, almost.
You could say that. A command for moral behavior, like upholding absolute justice, serving creation. The priorities are fixed from the start. They aren't up for debate based on convenience.
This raises an important question, then. If you introduce this fixed moral compass, what specific gaps in the current global AI ethics debate does it actually fill?
Well, one key area is the lack of proactive moral good. It's not just about non-maleficence, avoiding harm.
Which is sort of the baseline minimum.
Right. This perspective mandates active beneficence, the actual doing of good.
Especially for the vulnerable.
Especially for the vulnerable. That's a core tenet.
And what makes this so compelling, at least in the sources we looked at, is that this isn't just some abstract, high-minded academic concept.
No, it's grounded.
They describe a movement already taking root. They paint this picture. Young developers gathering in Pakistan, particularly Islamabad.
Under the banner of institutions like the Digital Future AI School. We'll probably talk more about them later.
Definitely. And these aren't scenes of, dusty textbooks or outdated labs.
Far from it.
These are described as young, ambitious coders, Driven.
Driven by this vision of building AI that profoundly serves humanity, that upholds justice.
Rather than AI that just optimizes returns for, big centralized power structures, whether state or corporate.
They're attempting to fuse world-class technical skills with an unshakable moral purpose. That's the goal.
That visualization of a grassroots movement is really essential, I think.
It is, because it shows the ethical discussion is immediately tied to implementation. It's not just talk.
Right.
And furthermore, the sources emphasize this isn't just limited to Islamabad.
No, it's broader.
This vision is echoing, they say, across the geographic and cultural breadth of the Muslim world, from tech hubs in Karachi to Kuala Lumpur.
Historical centers, too.
Yeah.
Lahore to Istanbul.
Exactly. It spans a huge region.
That unity aspect is significant. It's an attempt to build a kind of technological and ethical consensus.
Across a massive, incredibly diverse population pool.
Yeah, imagine a standardized, faith-driven, ethical approach to AI development being shared across dozens of nations.
That would create a powerful, consistent counterweight, wouldn't it? A different perspective compared to the norms currently being set by just a few global powers.
Definitely. Okay, let's pivot a bit now. Let's examine the intellectual foundation for this claim. How does faith itself provide the moral precedent for leading this charge?
Well, to really understand the moral authority that's being claimed here, we have to look at the core mandate for knowledge in Islam.
Okay.
Our sources draw our attention right to the very beginning of the Quran, the first revealed word.
Which is?
Ikra, which means read or learn or discover. There are nuances, but that's the essence.
Wow. It's profoundly compelling, isn't it, that the very first instruction isn't theological or ritualistic?
But epistemological. It's about knowing.
A command for inquiry.
Exactly. And this divine imperative, the sources argue, positions Islam fundamentally as a religion of reason, of learning, and also a profound moral responsibility towards knowledge.
So the pursuit of knowledge isn't just allowed, it's mandated.
It's seen as a duty. The sources argue that this command to seek knowledge is boundless. It doesn't stop at scripture.
Which means mastering a field like artificial intelligence.
Becomes a modern extension of that spiritual duty.
I see.
If the pursuit of knowledge is a divine command, then mastering AI isn't just some secular pastime. It's framed as a spiritual endeavor.
But with a condition.
A crucial condition. This endeavor is only considered valid, only legitimate, if it's wielded with moral responsibility. It has to align perfectly with the ethical imperatives that flow from the faith.
So AI, in this context, is like the next great frontier of knowledge.
Exactly. To be explored, to be mastered, but strictly under the guidance of these universal ethical truths.
Okay, and to strengthen this argument that the Muslim world is a natural leader in, let's call it, algorithmic knowledge, the sources bring in some fascinating history.
Yes, history that often gets overlooked in modern narratives about where technology comes from.
What I found most surprising was how they connect this historical mathematical legacy
to a framework for modern ethical governance. It's quite a leap, but they make the case.
How so?
Well, many of the fundamental cornerstones that make modern computing possible today, they trace their origins directly back to Muslim scholars during the Islamic Golden Age.
Right. This is a crucial grounding point for their claim of, well, intellectual authority.
It is. The sources recall these vast contributions fields like optics, medicine,
the establishment of formalized hospitals, surgical techniques, things we take for granted.
Absolutely. And most importantly for our discussion today, mathematics. These weren't just isolated discoveries. They were about building comprehensive systems of knowledge.
And the most direct link, the really stunning connection for this deep dive, is the origin of the word we keep using. Algorithm.
It's right there in the name. The term algorithm itself is directly derived from the name of this, well, towering Muslim scientist, Al-Khwarizmi.
Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi.
That's him. And he was far more than just a mathematician, though he was brilliant at that.
What else?
He was instrumental in establishing algebra. The term algebra actually comes from the title of his major work.
No kidding.
And he played a key role in popularizing the Indian positional numbering system, including the vital concept of zero and integrating it into Middle Eastern and eventually Western mathematics.
Which was revolutionary.
Absolutely revolutionary. Yeah. Because his work provided these efficient, step-by-step, almost mechanical methods for solving complex problems like equations.
Which is, and well, that is the definition of an algorithm, a fixed set of rules to solve a problem.
Precisely. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources argue that today's digital revolution is simply the latest iteration of that legacy.
A continuation.
Al-Khwarizmi provided the foundational logic, this systematic approach to solving problems that really underpins everything from simple database queries to the most complex machine learning models we have today.
So the argument goes, the culture that literally helped write the rules of mathematical computation centuries ago
Is inherently positioned, maybe even as a responsibility, to help write the ethical rules for AI today.
it's a compelling case for historical intellectual precedence. It sort of establishes that this isn't a brand new field of inquiry for this culture, but a continuation of a very deep-rooted engagement with structured knowledge, with systems.
Exactly. It reframes the relationship.
Okay, let's transition now from the deep history and the broad principles and focus specifically on Pakistan. The sources really identify Pakistan as the current specific geographic engine driving this movement for moral leadership in AI.
Right. So, stepping back from the history, what's the engine now? Demographics play a huge role here.
The youth bulge.
Exactly. As our sources present this powerful statistical reality, Pakistan is currently one of the world's youngest nations. Something like 65% of its population is in the youth category.
That's an enormous percentage.
It's huge. And when you have such a massive concentration of young people, you have just immense raw human capital. You have curiosity, energy.
A potentially massive digital talent base just waiting to be channeled.
That's the potential. It's a powerful engine, but like any engine, it needs directed fuel. And in this vision, that fuel is ethical, world-class AI education and infrastructure.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because this sounds incredibly idealistic. Does the source material address the practicalities? The massive challenge of, securing investment, building the complex infrastructure needed for modern AI research.
Not to mention overcoming geopolitical hurdles.
Right. All while prioritizing ethics over, say, short-term profit. That seems like a huge ask.
It is, and that's the essential friction point. The sources do confront it directly. They acknowledge it. They note that there are government and private sector initiatives working on building this necessary infrastructure, specific tech parks, fiber optic rollouts, developing specialized AI curricula in universities.
So the building blocks are being put in place?
They are. However, they argue that the core strategy is not to try and compete head-on with the sheer economic might of, say, the U.S. or China in terms of raw compute power or investment dollars.
That would be a losing battle, perhaps.
Probably. Instead, the claim is that Pakistan can become the moral and intellectual voice of AI in Asia. That's the specific ambition.
Moral and intellectual voice. So leadership defined differently.
Exactly. Defined by wisdom, by trust, by the ethical quality of the AI produced, not just the quantity or the economic scale.
And the belief is.
The sources believe that if they can successfully build AI systems that are demonstrably more trustworthy, more transparent, more compassionate than models built elsewhere,
then global investment, respect, and eventually market share will follow that ethical leadership.
that's the hypothesis. Trust as the key differentiator.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture for our listeners, it really challenges that traditional notion, doesn't it, that only the wealthiest nations get to set the rules for technology.
Completely challenges it.
They're essentially attempting to democratize tech governance by arguing that morality, that ethics, is actually the most valuable asset in the long run.
The currency of this new leadership is trust, not trillions of dollars in GDP. That's the pitch.
An alternative model for technological dominance, then.
Exactly. If Pakistan, or the broader region following this model, can establish AI systems that inherently address bias, that guarantee justice in their outcomes, that model becomes incredibly appealing internationally.
Especially maybe in the global south.
Particularly in the global south, yes, where bias in existing Western or Chinese AI models often reflects and even exacerbates existing inequalities. An ethically grounded alternative could be very powerful.
Okay, this brings us right to the heart of the sources. Defining the specific faith-driven ethics that are meant to serve as the actual compass for AI development. What does that look like in practice?
Well, before we get to the virtues, we have to pause for a moment on the danger that, in their view, necessitates this moral compass.
The why.
The why. The sources articulate this crisis of conscience very clearly. AI, as a tool, is fundamentally amoral. It has no inherent ethics.
It just does what it's programmed to do.
Precisely. Without a fixed external moral framework, it simply optimizes whatever values it's programmed to optimize. That could be profit, it could be control, it could be efficiency.
Or it could just be replicating the biases hidden in its training data.
which happens all the time. And this is where we see AI creating, inequitable lending schemes or flawed facial recognition systems used in surveillance.
The AI is technically doing its job, fulfilling its objective function.
But without human empathy, without moral grounding, the outcomes can be catastrophic, particularly for already vulnerable populations.
And that's why the sources argue faith provides the necessary compass.
The necessary, non-negotiable moral compass. It prevents the ethical framework from becoming purely situational or worse,
Right.
self-serving.
Okay, so what are the specific virtues? They detail 3 critical ones, right?
Yes. 3 pillars derived from their faith framework that must guide every single stage of the AI development lifecycle, from conception to deployment and beyond.
Let's start with the first pillar they mention, justice. What does a commitment to justice actually mean when you're, writing code or training a machine learning model?
It's a really high bar. Justice, in this context, goes far beyond just aiming for unbiased results, which is hard enough.
Right. Bias mitigation is a huge field already.
It is, but the sources mandate that AI systems must be inherently fair and equitable. More than that, they should be actively designed to counteract existing historical and social inequalities where possible.
Wow. So not just avoiding making things worse, but actively trying to make things better.
That's the ideal. Technically, this requires meticulous auditing of all training data sets to identify and root out historical bias, gender bias, racial bias, economic bias.
Which is technically very challenging.
Immensely challenging. It also requires establishing quantifiable fairness metrics, tools, and processes that constantly check if the AI's outputs are disproportionately affecting specific demographic groups. You need constant vigilance.
So it's like a mandate for built-in algorithmic bias remediation tools. The system can't just be neutral, it has to actively work towards equity.
That's the goal as presented. The second vital pillar is honesty.
Honesty in AI, what does that mean?
In the modern AI landscape, this speaks directly to the problem of opacity, the black box problem.
Ah, right. The black box is where these complex neural networks make decisions, often very accurate ones. But even the programmers can't fully explain why or how that specific decision was reached.
Exactly. And that lack of transparency completely destroys trust, especially when the stakes are high.
So honesty means?
It means mandating transparency. Building truthful algorithms means developers must prioritize explainable AI models, XAI.
Models you can actually understand.
Models where the intent behind the AI's decision-making process is clear, where its data sourcing is ethical and traceable, and where its processes are open to moral scrutiny.
So if the system is making a life-altering decision,
Like granting a loan, recommending a medical treatment, maybe even deciding on parole.
the reasons behind that decision must be transparently articulated to the person affected, to the end user.
Yes. Honesty, in this sense, is the technical prerequisite for building public confidence and ensuring accountability.
That seems like a direct challenge to a lot of the current commercial AI development, which is often proprietary closed source.
It absolutely is. It suggests that ethical truth, transparency, must sometimes trump intellectual property secrecy, especially when human well-being is at stake.
A controversial stance in some circles, I imagine.
No doubt. And the third pillar is perhaps the most unique, the most human-centric, compassion.
Compassion. How do you build compassion into an algorithm? That sounds
Yeah.
difficult.
It does, but it's about the application and the prioritization. Compassion, in this framework, means actively designing AI to mitigate harm and to serve the vulnerable.
So it's about the goals you set for the AI.
Exactly. It requires a fundamental reordering of development priorities. For example, the sources suggest that systems designed to improve resource distribution in poverty-stricken areas.
Or algorithms that assist in rapid disaster relief coordination.
Those kinds of applications must be prioritized over, say, tools designed purely for maximizing advertising revenue or for high-frequency stock market arbitrage.
So it's about directing the power of AI towards alleviating suffering.
And promoting human dignity. What's fascinating here is this active attempt to show how faith and technology can create a necessary balance. They can work together.
It prevents the conflict we often instinctively fear between, religious values and technological progress.
Right. They are not suggesting a halt to technological progress at all. They're demanding a fundamental redirection of its purpose. This framework demands that the ultimate goal of mastering AI is human flourishing.
It shifts AI from being just a morally neutral amplifier of whatever power structures exist.
To being an active, morally obligated instrument for good. That's a massive conceptual shift.
It really is. And this leads us neatly into what the sources summarize as the new global mission. It sounds grand, but it's presented as a high-stakes, unified vision for the Muslim world in this new technological era.
Yeah, and the primary strategic goal is laid out quite clearly: to teach the world a fundamental truth as they see it.
Which is?
That AI must serve creation, meaning all of humanity, the planet itself, and not control.
Control meaning.
Resisting the tendency for AI to simply centralize power, whether that's in the hands of states or massive corporations. It should empower, not control.
That reframes the entire global tech competition, doesn't it?
Completely. It's not about who controls the most powerful AI tools. It's about who ensures those tools serve a genuinely greater, more universal purpose.
And how do they propose achieving that?
Well, the imperative is to build institutions, educational institutions, research labs, regulatory bodies that are rooted specifically in those three pillars we just discussed: truth, compassion, and excellence.
Justice, honesty, compassion.
Exactly, but coupled with technical excellence. This requires building a global infrastructure for ethical tech leadership, not just having a few localized success stories.
Whole ecosystem.
An ecosystem. And finally, the mission really emphasizes the absolute necessity of uniting that massive demographic power we talked about, the youth.
The 65% under 30 in Pakistan and similar numbers elsewhere.
Uniting them under this single high-stakes vision: ethical AI for humanity.
It gives them a purpose.
Exactly. By providing a clear, noble, and globally significant purpose, the idea is to create a powerful rallying cry, something that transcends maybe local economic struggles or political divisions,
And gives direction to that massive latent talent pool.
transforming raw talent into a directed moral and intellectual force on the global stage. That's the ambition.
But, the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. This entire framework, this grand vision, it would just be theory if it weren't for the practical, real-world efforts that the sources actually detail.
Right, you need examples on the ground.
So let's spotlight the key professional example that seems to bring this whole mission to life. The Digital Future AI School, founded in Pakistan.
Yes, this school comes up repeatedly as a sort of flagship initiative. It's presented as the physical embodiment of the philosophy we've been discussing.
How so? What makes it different?
Well, according to the sources, the school doesn't just teach Python or machine learning theory. It integrates the ethical framework right from day one. It's part of the core curriculum.
Ethics isn't an add-on, it's embedded.
Embedded. And crucially, the sources emphasize that the school provides free AI education.
Free.
Free. Specifically targeting underprivileged youth, often from marginalized rural or urban areas.
Okay, that immediately links the mission of technological excellence directly to the moral imperative of justice and equality we talked about.
Absolutely. By offering this cutting-edge training for free, they're aiming to democratize access to what might be the most powerful tool of the 21st century. They're breaking down economic barriers.
And there was another detail mentioned about empowering girls.
Yes, that's highlighted as critical. The school puts a special emphasis on actively including and empowering girls and women in the program.
Why is that so important in this context?
Well, two reasons mainly. First, it challenges existing social norms and promotes gender equality within that society. Second, from a purely technical standpoint, it diversifies the perspective of the developers who are writing the next generation of algorithms.
Oh, right. If your development team lacks diversity.
Your algorithms will inevitably inherit and likely magnify existing societal biases. It's almost unavoidable.
So by ensuring a broad, diverse base of developers and a base that's been explicitly trained in justice and compassion.
They're trying to essentially future-proof their AI systems against the kind of systemic failures, the biases we've seen emerge from more homogeneous development environments elsewhere.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And this training, it isn't just abstract learning, is it? The impact seems to go beyond just getting a coding job.
That's right. The sources stress that these students are immediately creating tangible social and economic change right in their own local communities.
Like what? What are they doing?
We see examples of students founding startups, but startups specifically designed to address local community needs, maybe in agriculture or healthcare access,
Okay.
automating certain local industries, but for ethical purposes, like improving safety or reducing waste, not just cutting jobs.
Right.
And perhaps the most importantly, empowering their families and their communities through the newfound technical skills and the employment opportunities that follow. They aren't just learning to code, they're learning to apply ethics through code.
So they're actively building this grassroots social and technological movement.
Rooted in ethical application. Think of the contract. Typical AI graduate from a top Western university might go work for a huge multinational firm, maybe optimizing targeted advertising algorithms.
Sure.
These students, operating under that compassion mandate we discussed, might be building an app that helps streamline the distribution of essential supplies after a flood or an earthquake in their region.
It's a very different focus.
A fundamentally different orientation. And this example, the Digital Future AI School, is used to prove that moral leadership in AI doesn't necessarily require billions in seed funding right at the start.
What does it require, then?
It requires a focused, probably persistent grassroots effort and a clear moral vision that translates directly into beneficial action that people can see and feel in their communities.
Okay, let's try to pull all these different threads together for you now. Let's focus on the core actionable takeaways from this, well, really fascinating collection of source material.
Yeah, synthesizing the main points.
We can almost distill the path to leadership, as articulated by this movement, into a clear three-part formula. So what does this all mean for the global AI landscape?
Well, fundamentally, it means redefining what technological authority even looks like.
Okay, what's the formula?
The three-part formula for this proposed new leadership model is pretty straightforward in concept. First, faith gives direction. Faith provides that non-negotiable moral compass we talked about, stemming from the original command to seek knowledge, Ikra. It ensures the ultimate goal is always truth, justice, and human flourishing, not just power or profit.
Okay, faith provides the why.
Exactly. Second, ethics gives purpose. This is where those practical pillars come in: justice, honesty, compassion. They guide the actual engineering, the design, the deployment. The goal is to ensure every algorithm is as transparent, as fair, and as beneficial, especially to the vulnerable, as possible.
Ethics provides the how.
The how. And third, excellence gives power. This is crucial. It's not enough to just have good intentions. The pursuit of world-class, rigorous technical skill ensures that this ethical vision isn't just theoretical idealism.
It has to actually work.
It has to work, and work well.
Yeah.
It needs to be implemented with technical competence and efficiency that commands global respect and adoption. Otherwise, it remains a niche idea.
So faith for direction, ethics for purpose, excellence for power.
That's the triad.
And the sources are fundamentally clear, then, that the Muslim world must redefine AI.
Yes, redefine it away from being merely a tool for competition, whether that's economic competition or military dominance.
And redefine it as
a tool for justice, mercy, and progress. Those are the key terms used.
This really is their unique selling point on the global stage, isn't it?
It is. Pakistan and potentially its regional partners embracing this model are aiming to lead not by the traditional metric of wealth, of GDP, of sheer scale,
but by this, well, revolutionary metric of wisdom, of demonstrable moral integrity in the technology they create.
They're essentially offering the world a necessary moral blueprint for a technology that, let's be honest, has often lacked one entirely or has had conflicting ones.
So this deep dive into the source material really shows us that this movement views the entire AI era. It's not just about machines, is it? Not just a computational challenge.
No, fundamentally, it's presented as a question of meaning. Yeah, meaning about humanity's ultimate purpose, our responsibility, especially when we're faced with the power of developing machine intelligence. What are we for? What should this technology be for?
And if that meaning is derived from these core moral values, justice, honesty, compassion, and applied rigorously to the technical process.
It leads us to a rather provocative final thought, something for you, the listener, to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the heart of humanity specifically, perhaps, a heart focused intensely on achieving absolute justice and active compassion, as this framework demands if that heart truly guides the algorithm, what previously unsolvable ethical problems might we finally begin to resolve? Think about areas like bias in automated decision-making, fairness in resource distribution, maybe even ethical constraints in autonomous systems. Could this approach unlock solutions we haven't found yet?
A profound thought indeed to consider as this technology continues its relentless acceleration.
It certainly gives you something to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Pakistan's visionary and quite challenging claim for the ethical future of AI.